Hello and welcome to Wagner. Today we're going to be talking about the Wagner power spray range. There's 4 power sprayers in the range, starting with the W95, the W140P, the W180P and the W450SE, and they're commonly known as buzz guns. They range in price from $69 through to $199, and all the information can be found in the Wagner product catalogue. The Wagner power sprayers are an electric piston pump. How they work is you have the piston and the motor pushing the piston in and out. As the piston comes back, it creates a vacuum in the pump housing, sucking paint up into the housing. The motor drives it forward, pressurizing the paint. The paint flows through the swirl valve, which is a pre-atomizer. It starts breaking up the paint particles. And because of the high pressure and the small hole in the fluid nozzle, this atomizes the paint. The fluid nozzle is an important part of the power sprayer. The hole size regulates the volume of paint coming through. The number 8, or 0.8 of a millimeter nozzle, is ideal for your water-based paints, so your interior, exterior, painting your fence, that sort of thing. The number 4, or the 0.4 millimeter, is perfect for your oil-based and solvent-based paints. All units are sold ready to spray water-based paints with the round nozzle supplied with the gun. The power spray units are capable of spraying both water and oil-based paints and are ideal for small to medium decoration and renovation jobs around the house. These units have a pressure regulating control knob and an on-off switch. The key to remove the nozzle can be found clipped to the power lead. This is how we strip the power sprayers, either for maintenance or just general cleaning. This is the nozzle guard, but it also doubles as the pump retaining nut. Slide the pump section out of the gun. We can put the electric motor to the side and just check to see if that piston is jammed in the fully in position. If it is, it's probably just stuck with some paint and just needs removing for cleaning. On the front here we have the fluid nozzle. So the front nozzle on all the power sprayers comes standard with a number 8, and that's 0.8 millimeters. That's the hole size. We use our key that we've just unclipped off the power lead, put it in there and unscrew out. So under the fluid nozzle we have the swirl valve. That comes out from the front, and you can see it has the white end on it. The white end is for water-based paints, acrylic paints. On the end of the swirl valve we have a little boot, a nylon boot. That has to be in really good condition and nice and smooth. If it's furry, like it looks like somebody's rubbed some sandpaper or a file over it and it's all furry around the end of it, that needs to be replaced. It's worn and the machine won't suck up any paint. Now to remove that piston, if it was stuck, jammed all the way in, we'd put a little pin punch in through the front or a blunted 3-inch nail, and just very gently we'd tap that through and push the piston out the back. To remove the spring, we just push it down onto the table and pop that off. And now we have our piston and pump housing. What we're looking for here is that the piston is nice and lubed and it's nice and clean. If it's got paint stuck all over it, we need to clean it up with a bit of terps and a rag. And just a few drops of oil. A couple of drops inside the rear pump housing. And just slide that piston in and out. Make sure it's nice and free, slides nicely, it's not all notchy and sticky. It's got to be nice and free. Okay, if we remove the bowl off the bottom of the pump, here we'll find the rigid suction tube, and that's where your paint's getting sucked up into the pump housing. Under the pump housing we have 3 holes. The front hole is a breather hole and it has to be kept clean and clear. If it gets blocked with paint, then you can easily clean it just with a pin or a needle. The centre hole is for your rigid suction tube. That's where your paint gets sucked up from the bowl. The rear hole here is a drip return, and that's for any paint that makes its way past the piston Instead of going into the motor, it drips back to your bowl through that hole. Put your thumb over that centre hole, where your paint would be sucked up into the pump housing, and your other finger in the front nozzle. Now just move that piston backwards and forwards, and you should feel suction on your thumb and finger as you move that backwards and forwards. If you can't feel any suction, then air is leaking in the back of your piston and housing, and your piston and all your housing need to be replaced. To check wear on your swirl valve, things to look for are, in the nozzle you got the 3 holes. Now paint comes up through the back of those holes to the front. You've got to make sure that these are clean and clear. You can easily clean them just with a pin or a needle. And the other thing to look for is that these lines going from the bottom to the top all the way around, over time they wear and the lines will go from the top to the top. At that point the swirl valve will no longer atomize your paint and you'll get a horrible spray pattern with big droplets of paint. The other thing to look for is these holes should be perfectly round. Over time they elongate, and at that stage as well it needs to be replaced, as these are a wear item. On the back of the swirl valve is a nylon boot. Now this is a valve that seals the front of the pump housing. As you can see on this worn one, it's very furry. Now this won't seal and it will cause the machine to leak, and it won't suck up any paint. The white swirl valve is perfect for your acrylic, water-based paints. If you're going to be using oil-based or solvent-based paints, you need to go to the black swirl valve. To match the black swirl valve, you need to go to a smaller number 4, which is 0.4 millimeter. It's a smaller hole, so less paint's going to come out. If either of the swirl valves wear out, they can be easily replaced. Wagner supply them in packs of 3. Okay, now to reassemble the gun. Grab a piston, a couple of drops of oil, in the back of the pump section. We grab our spring, just slide it over the piston and just turn it gently until it clips on. Slide that in the back of your pump housing. Now it's ready to go into the front of the power sprayer. We slide that in. Get your retaining nut. This doesn't need to be over tightened. All it is just to hold the pump housing in the front of the gun. Then we have our rigid suction tube, goes into the centre hole. Screw the bowl over the top of that. Then all we need to do is put in the swirl valve. The swirl valve goes in, boot first. Grab our nozzle over the top. Now when we screw this on, we only just want to nip it up. If we over tighten it, it'll squash that swirl valve and it'll deform our spray pattern. The little key just clips back onto your power lead for the next time you need to clean the machine up. It's that easy. These units are airless units, which means there's no air required to atomize the paint. Power sprayers use high pressure of up to around 1200 psi. The W450SE has an additional feature of an electronic spray control. This regulates the motor speed from 100, 50, 25 and 12%. By pressing this button, it gives you better spray control and regulates the amount of paint coming out the nozzle. All units come with an 800ml container, except for the W95, which is a 600ml container. When we're spraying, we want to keep the gun nice and level, as if we tilt the gun forward too far, the paint can flood the breather hole. If we tilt the gun back, the rigid suction tube can come out of the paint and start sucking air. Where you need to paint a ceiling or maybe some decking where the power sprayer might need to be pointed down or up, we should use the flexible extension. How we fit this, let's grab our little key off the power lead, undo the fluid nozzle, And we're going to leave the swirl valve inside. Grab the extension and just screw it straight over the top of that swirl valve. And just nip it up, it doesn't need to be over tightened. Then on the front we have another little orange valve that stays in place, and we just remove the retaining cap off. The little orange valve just stays put in the front of the extension. And we screw our fluid nozzle over the top. We just nip it up, we don't want to over tighten it. And we use our key just to nip that up again. And again, we just nip it up, we don't over tighten it. Now we have the flexible extension screwed on the front of our gun. So if we want to paint a ceiling, we just simply tilt that up. Spray away, keeping the bowl nice and level. If we wanted to spray some decking, we just simply turn that down and away we go. Bowl's nice and level, so there's no paint getting flooded into the breather hole, and we're not tipping it back, allowing that suction tube to come up out of the paint. When selling a power sprayer to your customer, try and find out what sort of job are they doing. If they've got a big job on, they don't want to be refilling this container all the time. So a great alternative is the flexible suction tube extension. Our flexible suction extension kit is made up of a flexible hose. We have our plug that the hose goes onto. This end goes up into our gun. And our clip. The hose gets threaded through here and this clips into the bucket to hold the hose down. To assemble it up, we remove the bowl off the bottom of the gun. Take our rigid suction pipe out, give it a little twist. Grab our hose, and on the hose here you'll see it's got center port of pump to filter. Okay, so what we need to do is make sure that this piece of the hose goes into the center port on our plug. Here we go, we're away. We've got our suction hose plugged in, and we've also got our drip return hose that can go back into the bucket. The pins on the top are taper lock. Center port goes into the center port of our gun. Push that all the way in. Grab our retaining nut, that goes over the top, and screw that up. Just nip it up. Now all we need to do is thread our hose in through our clip. That's going to hold it into the side of our bucket. We clip that into the inside of our bucket, just making sure the hose is going right to the bottom. Now we've fitted the flexible suction extension, all we have to do is prime it. By priming, we're getting rid of all the air out of the hose. We lift the paint bucket up and have our gun underneath, and we can spray that out onto a bit of cardboard, and as we spray it, it'll suck up the paint using a siphoning effect to help it prime up and get rid of that air. Once it's primed up, we're ready to spray. And we can hold the bucket in one hand or have that on the ground. We can spray a ceiling, we can spray a decking, and it doesn't matter which direction the gun is, and also it takes all that weight of the bowl off your hand. Before we start spraying, it's really important that we test the thickness or the viscosity of our paint. Each of the power sprayers or fine spray machines come with a viscosity cup inside the bowl when you buy the machine. How we test the viscosity is we dip it into the paint, we pull it out and we start our stopwatch. And we start counting off seconds until we get the first drip or the first break from the bottom of the cup. Once we get that break, we stop our watch, and those seconds are now a reference to how thick the paint is. We've got our first drips and our first break. In this instance, it's taken too long, so we need to thin the paint a little. If the paint doesn't flow through the viscosity cup at all, then we know that the paint is too thick, and we may need to thin up to a maximum of 10%. In the Wagner product catalogue, you'll find reference to paint viscosities and how many seconds the paint should flow through the viscosity cups for the different machines. Most paints can be thinned up to 10%, but check the product guide on the back of the paint tin. The power sprayers have a round nozzle. How we use it is we keep the gun level and we spray down the wall for our first coat. Keeping the trigger on, we go across and back up, nice and quickly, overlapping 50%. Bending our knees, keeping our wrist moving up and down, keeping the gun nice and straight. Now a second coat, we come across it, keeping the gun straight again. So we go across, down, overlapping 50%, down, keeping the trigger on the whole time. For the first coat, we still want it to be a little bit see-through, so we haven't got the full thickness on there yet. Now for the second coat, once the paint's tacked off, we're going to go down. The second coat will give us the full thickness, the full coverage. Cleaning up is usually the worst part of any project, but no matter which unit your customer chooses from the Wagner Power Spray range, they'll find them as easy to clean as they are to use. It's that easy. Whatever your customer's painting requirements may be, you can guarantee them a faster, smarter finish by recommending one of the Wagner Power Sprayers. Here's a few tips and tricks to pass on to your customers. For the smartest finish, always start by preparing what you want to paint, by sanding, undercoating or cleaning first. Remember, your finish is only as good as your prep work. That's all on the Wagner Power Spray range for now. If you've got any questions or need product information or technical advice, visit our website or call 1-800-WAGNER.